All right, folks, I'd like to call this meeting of the Erie County Council order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And of course, Ms. Showerman will give us an optional prayer or invocation.
This is from Robert Marston. It says, happiness is a choice, not a result. Nothing will make you happy until you choose to be happy. No person will make you happy unless you decide to be happy. Your happiness will not come to you. It can only come from within you.
I think that's appropriate for today. I like that. So let's do a roll call. Make sure everybody's here.
All right. Mr. Bale.
Here.
Mr. Horton.
Here.
Mrs. Rennie. Here. Mrs. Showerman.
Here.
Mr. Scatelli.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Here.
And Chairman Schenk.
Here. Next, we have the hearing of the public. We have several people that have signed up, so that gives you a 5-minute. So Danny Jones is number one. Just give us your name, municipality, and your time will start.
Good morning, Danny Jones, City of Erie. Good morning, County Council. I want to thank you for the opportunity to voice our concerns about the removal of funds for the GCAC Senior Services, GED and Adult Education, and the Summer Jam Program. We believe these are worthwhile programs that assist seniors to get support and service that allow them to better enjoy their golden years, give them an opportunity to interact with their peers in a safe and supportive environment. We also have hundreds of people who do not complete their high school education. A GED gives them another chance to get their life back together and get on track. With the community college, as well as some programs in the community requiring a GED to participate, it is essential to have these services available locally to our community. For the past 50 years, the county has provided a summer work program. When I was a kid, it was called NYC. An experience that provided me and thousands of people throughout the years get our first work experience and be comfortable with the world of work. I think for me it's worked out pretty decent. Now is not the time to eliminate this program. We have so many kids who need something to do to occupy their time in a positive manner. Throughout this hearing, the majority of the rationale that we have heard about not granting the funds is that we have enough funds in our reserves to cover the cost of these programs. There has never been a condition of receiving funds based upon what an organization has in its reserves. I sat here today and heard over $6 million, I think, proposed for funding without going through the RFP process, no written proposal in hand. And to me, why do we have an RFP process? Why do we have a proposal submitted if we're going to come to these meetings and just give away money without anything in writing for those purposes? Now, we as GCAC, we were requested for a lot of information to be provided. We had to provide pay stubs for every kid that went through the Summer Jam program. We've been attacked about our reserves, and we have shown, not only to you, but to the county executive, that we have about 2.5 months of reserves in our coffers. To spend this money down and leave us with no reserves that has taken years to accumulate, is unfortunate and is not prudent for us to move forward on that. As far as the Summer Jams program, be assured I have nothing against Erie Together. We're one of the founding organizations of Erie Together. They have been one of our partners. When you talk about financial accountability, I want you to understand that we are the financial conduit for Erie Together. We are where their money comes through, and we distribute that and account for them. So to take the money from us and give it to them, they have no staff to run a Summer Jams program. They have never ran a Summer Jams program. And they have limited staff. I think it's irresponsible. Again, we provided you and the county executive with information to support our stance. And I am pleased to see that there are folks want to see these funds back into budget. Those who support our programs, I thank you. You have heard the public's request. I am confident that we have done enough to show these services and importance to anyone doubting the necessity of these funds. I want to thank all the seniors and community members who have expressed their support for these services. By verbalizing their right to free speech, they have supported us in showing that the programs and services are vital to them. I know that your job is not easy, but I hope that you realize that GCAC wants to be a team player, and we're willing to meet with you and with the county executive to find ways to improve services for the citizens of Erie County and not eliminate them. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next was Art Leopold, but unfortunately he called in and said he wasn't feeling well. So next we have Freda Teffer. Just give us your name, municipality, and your time will start.
My name is Freda Tepfer, and I live in Erie, and I hope I don't hop like that when I talk. I will just mention that I have a bachelor's in soil science and a graduate work in soil science and a master's in adult education. I attended a meeting with the council and the ad hoc ARPA committee of the council, and nothing was proposed, so the meeting ended. It is dismaying that today a whole bunch of new proposals were added at the last minute with, as I've heard, no details. I am really concerned about Project Resolve. I don't think that the county needs to spend $5 million gaming funds and ARPA funds for this project. I think that it's interesting that it's not going to be the first battery facility. There's already something going on in Harrisburg. Everybody all over the country has the first battery facility. Maybe Inflation Reduction Act funds can be used for this. The executive wants to be the direct implementation of economic development. However, he has a job. He has a job to be county executive. It's not his job to be Mr. Economic Development. And that expertise and functions reside elsewhere. That money should not be used to fund this project. I also long for the day when I no longer see the word handicapped in your documents, in your budgets, on your signage, in your ordinances, period. That's a relict word. We can use the word accessible, but please try not to use that. As far as the funding, I support the funding. Most of the 60-item there's a group of 60s. I don't agree with number 69, which would have that money to Erie Together. I don't think Erie Together is as... Summer Jam is a little program that could. And it's already entrenched in the community, and people are aware of it, and this is really the way to go. I want you to be aware that a few days ago, the COG advertised a broadband feasibility study RFQ in the paper, and it was for the whole county. So why are we proposing now this $10 million for broadband? I think it's cart before the horse. And that's another item that I think should be removed. I'm trying to account for the things that I heard today. So there's that $2 or $3 million for the Lake Erie Watershed Improvement Fund, that's septic money. As a soil scientist, as somebody who's worked with county health departments and clean water funds, I know there are ample funding sources for septic improvement. And we should not be spending ARPA money for this purpose. The ARPA money should go to stuff that doesn't have other funding sources. We should remove the transfer of the ARPA money to the Erie Redevelopment Authority. I think it's interesting that you want to take money from people who are getting their mortgages and deeds and saying they should fund some item, but we don't want to raise taxes. Maybe we should be raising taxes. I agree with much of what Andre has said, that we should not be taking money from the ARPA funds to put into this redevelopment scheme that the executive has. There was an item that was for the creation of the number 29, that was for the creation of the Economic Development Department. I would go along with removing that. I also refer you to an editorial that State Representative Mirsky had in the paper about how there's not enough awareness of the funding that's out there for broadband expansion. I don't think that project is ripe yet. I think there's a lot of study that needs to be done. So all of this is just, and as I've said before, cooperative extension, the GED testing, the summer jam, the senior programs, Meals on Wheels, those are essentials. Those are the reasons people look at a community and say, this is a livable community. I will stay here. I will age in place here. If I see that these kinds of services that would make it possible for me to age in place are gone, that
Ms. Tuffy,
economic
your time is up.
equity that means I want to stay here are removed. So please,
Thank you.
thank you.
And next we have Karen Hund. I hope I said your last name. Karen, are you here? Karen? Carl Anderson. Kyle Hagstrom. Just give us your name and your municipality, and your time will start.
My name is Kyle Hagstrom. I'm from Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm here today as a portion of GCAC services for the aging. And my program primarily provides with AmeriCorps Seniors, which is the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. Last time I came to a county council meeting, we were bombarded, and I retired and senior volunteer program. Participants, whether they were volunteers or whether they were group leaders at various nonprofits. I just wanted to be clear that we are aware that RSVP is not an acronym for something other than Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. Just briefly, and I doubt I'll take the whole 5 minutes. I need to offer an explanation of what the RSVP program is. 1968, a group of gerontologists decided that the activity amongst the seniors and the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program has always been a demonstration for seniors of the age 55 and older. We have determined that we are no longer 55 and older, we are instead 55 and better, and we're working towards making our community and the nonprofits, the 15 different nonprofits that we work for in the community, in each district, there's either a volunteer that serves at a nonprofit or a volunteer that lives at it. Over 400 in our current county, providing services to the community and working towards the betterment of themselves through cognitive and avoiding social isolation. 1972, there were 14 RSVP programs started through the federal government with a budget of $1 million. Of the original 14, 3 remain. One of those being GCAC's AmeriCorps Senior Program, which is the RSVP program. That coupled with the foster grandparent program, of which you've also heard a lot. Traditionally, the RSVP program is a bipartisan promoted program that works again with seniors to provide a useful and important, impactful community tool to not only the betterment of themselves, but to the betterment of community. Again, the funding that we receive through the county grant is just to meet the match that we are required to raise for our family. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Amy Bridger? Amy, just give us your name and municipality, and your time will start.
Hi, Amy Bridger, representing Penn State Barron in Harbor Creek Township. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning and for the time and consideration that the council has given to Project Resolve. We entered into these discussions and forwarded this proposal at the request of the previous council which saw 2 uses for federal funding: to provide immediate financial relief to families that were suffering because of the pandemic, and to look forward and lay the groundwork for a new economic renaissance in Erie County. The first recommendation in the county COVID-19 economic report was a call for transformative projects, and that is exactly what Project Resolve is. Resolve is a long-term regional strategy to strengthen the competitiveness of Erie's manufacturing base. It is a community effort with several partners, including Gannon University, Impact Corey, Erie Western PA Port Authority, and the Northwest Pennsylvania Innovation Beehive Network, and they are also advancing elements of this project. The first phase at Penn State Behrend is the creation of the Center for Manufacturing Competitiveness, which will include research labs to support the region's plastics, metal casting, and transportation industries. The center will also house the nation's first heavy haul battery testing facility. Project Resolve and the Center for Manufacturing Competitiveness align with the county COVID-19 report, the investment playbook, the SED study, and the new Brookings report, which notes with clear and concerning data that our Erie's manufacturing base, which has been powering our local economy for generations, is losing ground and has been diminished by the COVID-19 pandemic. Pennsylvania now ranks 6th among 9 peer states in advanced industry job growth. The Brookings report cites one reason for our inability to keep up with the other markets: we consistently fail to invest in innovation programs. As a land-grant university and institution, Penn State has a mission of improving the community that we call home. And Erie needs a lot of help right now. But this is an area where we can help, where we can leverage the experience of our faculty, our pipeline of student talent, our longstanding partnerships with business and industry, and the powerful research engine of Penn State to make a difference right here at Erie. Some of you have asked why the county should invest in this, given the resources that exist at Penn State. I understand that question. This is an economic development project, one that requires multiple partners to achieve, and this is not something we can undertake without the support of our community. A project of this magnitude nearly always requires the vital combination of government, university, and industry funding. Penn State has pledged $5 million to Project Resolve. The university is poised to invest in Behrend and in Erie, but only if the local community stands with us. Penn State is not asking for a handout. We're asking for a partner. We have shown that we can leverage investments and maximize their local impact. The McGee Women's Research Institute Erie Initiative, for example, began with a $6 million grant from the Erie Community Foundation. Each of the partners, including Penn State Behrend, is expected to raise an additional $5 million. MWRI Erie is now a $26 million public health initiative. It is expected to generate $15 million in federal research in its first 5 years and $50 million by year 10. None of that would have been possible without that initial local investment. The funding plan for the center has always included 3 sources: RACP funding from the state, an investment by Penn State, and funding from the county. We already have secured a $1.5 million support from RACP, the first drawdown from an approved multi-year budget line of $10 million. Penn State has committed another $5 million. We are asking you to leverage that match funding, which will compound the local investment. The ordinances being considered today are the only funding we will seek from Erie County Council for construction of this center. We appreciate the call for more information about the design of the center and the capabilities it will offer. As this project unfolds and funding sources are identified, aspects of the design are coming into clearer focus. We expect schematics for the center to be completed in spring of 2023. The process will include consultation with industry partners whose work will be advanced by the center, and once the designs are approved, it will take approximately 18 months to build. On the jobs question, I want to be clear about one point. This effort is not designed to bring jobs to Penn State Behrend. Rather, it will directly support the manufacturing companies that are in critical need right now of research and development support. Our estimate is that 5,000 jobs will be created through this initiative. Those jobs will come as our manufacturers strengthen their competitive footing, and they are certain that with help, that will happen. Our business and industry partners have already committed to making $21 million of investments within their own companies based on the technology developed through Resolve. It is disheartening to us and our industry partners to see this project pitted against other efforts in the community, particularly DEI initiatives. Those programs and the agencies that provide them are essential to the success of our community and should be funded alongside Resolve. Fundamentally, what Project Resolve represents is a generational opportunity to provide both immediate and long-term strategic economic relief to our community. And if we fail to capitalize on this, we will cede our competitive manufacturing edge, and our community will continue to fall further behind.
Amy, I'm sorry, but your time is up. Thank you. That takes care of our folks that have signed up. Anybody that would like to say anything at this time, please step to the microphone, give us your name, your municipality, and your time will start.
Edison Nicholson, City of Erie, here representing the Youth Leadership Institute of Erie. I just want to propose a question. It's more of a thought, but to speak on what Mr. Horton was referring to as far as the ARPA funds, is it a way we could perhaps use some of those funds to relieve some of the strains that the general fund pot has in regards to giving funds to certain agencies? That's just a thought. That's one way that we can use the ARPA funds to really impact the minority community. The other thing I want to bring forward is I believe that a lot of the issues and the problems that we're experiencing today, I know that you guys have a difficult task of balancing the budget. My thought is, I believe that you guys should do more of getting into the community and researching some of these programs that are going on in the community. I think you need to be more in touch with what's going on. Also, December 14th, 6:30, 1306 East Lake Road, the Youth Leadership Institute of Erie will host this open house. And so I invite all of you to be there and to see what we've done in that part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else would like to say a few words? Just give us your name, municipality, and your time will start for 3 minutes.
Beth Terp, City of Erie. Once again, Council, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of the Adult Basic and the GED Preparation Program at GPAC. I have come to you, I believe this is my third time speaking about this program, and I have implored you with the financial cost. Today I want to come and talk about the human cost. We have partners with the Mercy Center for Women, the Erie Parenting Program. We have partnerships with other community resources, and I get calls daily from parole officers, lending case managers, from Lakeshore, from Safe Harbor, from SafeNet, from all manner of human needs departments all over the County of Erie. They're calling my phone. We need services. We need classes. We need help for these individuals. I got a call yesterday from a parole officer. I have a young man, he's 19, he's a new father. He got in some trouble last year and now he wasn't able to complete his high school diploma. He's working 40 hours a week, but he needs this diploma to keep himself out of jail and provide for his young family. Great. What is his schedule? Work with him. When can he attend class? Do you feel he'll thrive in person or online? We can fulfill both those needs. That young man completed orientation 2 days later because we don't believe in making individuals wait. I hold orientations every other week. I have a binder of phone calls that I keep in order to keep these individuals straight and know where they are in the process, whether they've called and need an orientation, if they're in the assessment process to come into our program, or what class they're in. And my teachers can tell you, I know everything about those individuals. How many people are in their family, where they work, what their background is, why didn't they complete their diploma program. And more as we talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and what it did, I've had calls. I couldn't do online schooling. COVID really just shut me down. I went into depression. I couldn't complete my classes, but they've now completed GEDs. I have seen a young woman break down in tears because we provided her the resources and the ability to take her GED test, and she walked out of my office and into the military recruiter's office to join the Marines. We gave her that opportunity. When I called her and said, what are you waiting on for your last test? I don't have the $30. we have funding to provide that because Erie County understands how important this is. Come and take your test. We can allow for funding for some cases like yours. It would have been months, she told me, until she could take that test. I have another woman, 45 years old. Her children are adults.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, but your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Anybody else would like to say anything? Please give us your name and municipality. And your time will start.
Good morning. My name is Homer Smith, Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm a board member of the Greater Erie Greater Erie Community Action Committee, your anti-poverty agency for the last 50 years. I would like to thank County Council for the opportunity to place those funds back into the budget to be considered as you vote. As you see, our administration, our board of directors, and those who serve as staff are very, very committed to serving the Erie population, both our elderly, our young people. The services that we provide here in the city of Erie are important. And the funds that the county has provided for almost 50 years as partners have made this an agency that's known throughout the nation. So again, we'd like to thank you. We ask you to consider voting for those funds going forward so we continue to help people and change lives. Have a wonderful day and a nice Thanksgiving. And again, continue to support those who make this a blessed community.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else would like to say a few words? Just give us your name, municipality, and your time will start.
Sam Tellerico, Harvard Road, City of Erie. I stand in opposition to Ordinance 145, 146, the $5 million for Project Resolve. I do so for two simple reasons. One is math, and the other is values. You can find poverty anywhere in Erie County. East Side, Corey, Albion, it's all over the place. One place you can't find poverty is Knowledge Parkway. They got a bunch of shiny new buildings up there. So let's give them more money. That makes a lot of sense. And they've done that, not that they shouldn't be there, but they've done that without the county's help, at least other than some infrastructure. A budget is a statement of values. And this budget is a forfeiture, and it's an abject forfeiture of the compact that this county has had with the most needy people in the community to provide human services. It's not right. Values. We have a $10 million budget deficit, and a responsible administration would do one of two things: cut expenses, raise revenues. Math. But this administration just wants to assign blame. That's their MO. Oh, it's the county employee benefits. It's not their mismanagement. If you pass these two ordinances, you're just going to be using that same old trope. Neediest people in Erie County, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, even though you don't have any boots, so we can give $5 million to a multinational corporation and a huge entity like Penn State. You know, I get down to Penn State, Maine every now and then, and they have $30 million buildings here, $40 million buildings there. Do they go to Center County government every time they build a new building and say, where's our money? If they don't do it in Center County, why should Erie do it? Penn State needs partners, huh? That sounds nice. Well, where are their partners? Do they go to Center County and say, where's our money? We need partners? No, they don't. This is just corporate welfare, plain and simple. Cut summer jobs, cut Meals on Wheels, GED programs. Since when is GCAT represent the bad guys in the community? That's a question. I have an answer. Since this county executive took office, that's when they became the bad guys. This proposal will start a slide toward a chaotic future for our budget.
Mr. Federico, your time is up.
Thank you. Please vote down this ordinance, these ordinances. Math and values matter.
Anybody else would like to say a few words? Anybody else like to say a few words? Anybody else? Please give us your name and municipality, and your time will start.
Hi, my name's Janet Kelly. I'm from Mill Creek. I just want to reiterate my support for the GCAC programs. I'm a retired nurse practitioner. I will tell you this, that the more support we can give for people to stay in their homes, they will not end up at Pleasant Ridge Manor. I have had 30 years as a nurse practitioner. I know what I'm talking about that way. I also know that when you throw money at education, you lift people out of poverty. When you have poverty, you have increased crime. How are we to bring businesses to Erie when the city of Erie looks crime-riddled? Why do you think the Erie Development Corporation has put so much money? And those are businesses to try to attract people to come here. So goes the city, the county goes after, will follow. I am appalled at this county executive. I think he's dividing. He's using really poor tactics. The optics are horrible. And I speak for a number of retired people, and we are keeping our eyes on all of you, how you are voting, and how you're allocating our resources. I'm appalled at some of the things that have happened. He's gone after long-term civic leaders. He's gone after their reputations with hotshots. I mean, really, what kind of executive is he to be personalizing things? He has gone after the black community in particular, and we've all paid attention to that. And that's all I want to say. I hope we have a better panel that can go forth for county executive in the next election, because we need one.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to say a few words? Anybody else like to say a few words? Last call. Anybody else would like to say a few words? Seeing none, we'll move on. I'll accept the motion for the minutes of the previous meetings to be approved.
So moved.
I have a first by Ms. Sharman, second by Mr. Scatella. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bailey.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Reports of county officials. Is there a report from the county executive over his designee this evening? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say thanks to everybody. I'll speak first as a citizen. I mean, I know all the work you put in on this budget and...
Stand up. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, just thank you for all the work you've put in. You're probably the lowest paid people in the whole county, but for all the hours you put in. And I also, everybody, I hope the information we gave out through emails, texts, phone calls, and whoever stopped up at the office, information our department gave you helps you out in making your decisions today. Otherwise, nothing right now
Thank you, sir.
at this moment.
Thank you. It says, thank you, Mr. Spartner. I have an old note here. Get rid of that. Next, we'll move on to the Finance Committee. Ms. Sharman, do you have a report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on Thursday, November 17th, and submit to the agenda in old business items A through B and in new business items A through H. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sharman. We'll move to the Personnel Committee. Mr. Scatella, do you have a report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The Personnel Committee met on November 17th and submit to the agenda new business items I and J. That's the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are any other reports from council? I know, Ms. Rennie, you said you had one. Do you have the floor? Okay, I apologize. Andre.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Shank. Thank you, Chairman Shank. I'll preface my remarks saying that I really enjoy working with my colleagues and working throughout the community. Some of the things I'm going to read are very relevant even today, but certainly they're going to refer to slavery, which none of us practice slavery, I hope, but some of us benefited some of us didn't. So this is the original County of Erie resolution. It's original, but for it's not the one that we originally ultimately. It speaks to the intent of the resolution declaring racism a health emergency crisis. And in light of the past couple of weeks' current events throughout our community, it really didn't make anybody look good. I felt that it was necessary to revisit what our intent was when we established the resolution declaring racism a health emergency crisis, which later led to this. And it reads, whereas the Charter of Erie County declares that the people of Erie County desire an improved focus on equity for all communities and citizens, and whereas almost all of the 400 years of history for blacks in America has been either under slavery or Jim Crow laws, which subjected black people to tremendous hardships and disadvantages in all areas of life. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention states that public health is the science and art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and promoting health through organized efforts and informed choices of society, organizations, public and private communities, and individuals. And whereas structural systemic racism creates a disparity between black and white people in nearly all aspects of people's lives, but most importantly in healthcare, healthy food, safe and affordable housing, well-paying jobs, and business ownership opportunities, quality transportation, educational opportunities, and safe places to be active, resulting in adverse health outcomes and shorter life expectancies among people of color, thus creating a public health crisis. And whereas the following are specific areas of disparity between black and white people in healthcare, health, food, safe and affordable housing, well-paying jobs, and business ownership opportunities, quality transportation, educational opportunities, and a safe place to be active. And whereas Erie County, that's us, seeks to address the impact of racism on public health at all levels of county government. And whereas anti-racism requires fundamental changes to all structural systems in Erie County. Whereas anti-racism requires fundamental changes to all structural systems in Erie County. For equitable policies and programs to be effective, attention, priority, and resources must be allocated to the implementation of strategies that are long-term and sustainable. And whereas Erie County Council and the Erie County Executive intend to take immediate action to address these obvious and crippling inequities, which are at the root of health disparities in our community and one of the effects of racism. And whereas because of these factors, statistics, information, and history, Erie County Council and the Erie County Executive desire to declare racism a public health crisis in Erie County. And whereas Erie County is committing its resources to openly and honestly address racism and to improve areas of all of the county's residents, including ending the disparity between black and white people when it comes to healthcare, healthy food, safe and affordable housing, well-paying jobs, and business ownership opportunities, quality transportation, educational opportunities, and safe places to be active. Healthcare. Whereas in Erie County, food insecurity was higher among the black population at 22% compared with whites at 9%. And whereas over half of Erie City's census tracts are more than half a mile from the nearest supermarket. And whereas in Erie County, the percentage of low birth weight babies born to black mothers at 12.8% is higher than 7% for white mothers. And whereas in Erie County, 68.2% of black women received or did not receive first trimester prenatal care compared with 82% of white women. Whereas in Erie County, the infant mortality rate of 22.8 per 1,000 live births for the black population is significantly higher than the 4.9 for the white population. And whereas In Erie County, the age-adjusted rate for all causes of death among black residents at 980.1 per 100,000 is significantly higher than the rate for white residents at 783.4. And whereas in Erie County, the age-adjusted rate for cancer deaths among black residents at 269.9 per 100,000 is significantly higher than the rate for white residents at 177.6. And whereas in Erie County, the age-adjusted rate for diabetes deaths among black residents is 56.7% per 100,000, significantly higher than the rate for white residents at 27.5%. And whereas Erie County, the percentage of heart attacks was higher among black adults at 11% compared with the rate of white adults at 7%. And whereas in Erie County, COPD prevalence was higher among black adults at 9% compared with the rate for white adults at 6%. And whereas in Erie County, self-reported mental health was higher among black adults at 49% compared to rate for white adults at 41%. Whereas in Erie County, 64% of black adults reported poor physical health in the past month compared with 43% for white adults. And whereas in Erie County, black residents experience obesity rates of 48%, while the white population sits at 34%. Safe and affordable housing. Whereas businesses traditionally are reluctant to invest in historically black communities, ergos the DEIC. Whereas historical policies and practices such as discriminatory lending practices known as redlining have shaped the difference in opportunities for safe and affordable housing for black people. And whereas federal agencies financed nearly half of all suburban homes in the 1950s and 1960s, with white people making up 98% of those loans approved. That one always stops me. I read it again. Whereas federal agencies financed nearly half of all suburban homes in the 1950s and 60s, with white people making up 90% of those loans approved. And over 37% of subsidized housing in Erie County is occupied by persons of color, who represent just 16% of the demographic population. Whereas persons of color in Erie County represent nearly 20% of all rental units, while only representing, this says 5% of all home ownership, but I can tell you it's more like 2.7%. Well-paying jobs and economic opportunity, I got more. Whereas in Erie County, black people are disproportionately represented in low-wage occupations such as healthcare support and custodial services compared to white people who disproportionately represent higher wage occupations like management and healthcare practice, a lot of essential workers. Whereas in Erie County, the median income for family households is $63,235 for white residents compared to $28,000 for the black population. I recently went back and looked at that because I thought it was a little high. It's more like 24,000. Whereas in Erie County, the median income for non-family households of one, for white families is $28,349. For black families or black individuals is $16,585 a year. Whereas remaining virtually unchanged since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the average wealth of white households is 6 times more than the average wealth of black households, and over a third of Erie County's black residents are living below the poverty level, closer to 40%. Whereas over a third, 38.6% of Erie County's black residents are living below the poverty level, compared to approximately 14.1% of white residents. And whereas, even when our economy is stable, black unemployment in Erie County is twice as high as white unemployment. Educational opportunities. In Pennsylvania, black students face dropout rates of over 3% compared to their white peers at 1%. Black students in the Erie City School District had a 66.5% graduation rate in 2019 as compared to 79% for white students. In Erie County, approximately 81% of black people possess a high school diploma compared to 93% of white people, whereas nearly a third of all white residents in Erie County have a bachelor's degree or higher education compared to only 13.8% of black residents. Whereas black residents in Erie County are twice as likely to not have home internet access. Twice as likely to not have home internet access. And are almost 3 times as likely to have no computer in their household as compared to white residents. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the County of Erie County, Pennsylvania, that Erie County Council and Erie County Executive hereby declare racism to be a public health crisis in Erie County. Erie County is committing its resources, well, kind of, in all areas of its government and throughout all of its departments and divisions to openly and honestly address racism and to eliminate the disparity between black and white people when it comes to health care, healthy food, safe and affordable housing, well-paying jobs, and business ownership opportunities, quality transportation, educational opportunities, and safe places to be active. You see, black people want all the same things that white people want for their families and their children. For 222 years in the county, that simply hasn't, our policies and the way that we do our budget has not reflected that. And so I felt the need to read that because the ARPA funds, the Erie Investment Playbook, some of the other plans out here all seem to be looking or saying that they're looking through the prism of equity, and it doesn't line up somewhere. That was the original. There's more to it, but I won't go into it. I think we all get the gist that for over 222 years in Erie County, black and brown, notice it didn't say Asian Pacific, it didn't say Latino, it didn't say any of that thing. That stuff made the cut in the new resolution. It made it more palatable for it to be passed and for us to receive the votes, which it passed 7-0 to, I might add, not that particular version, but the softened version in which you can reach out to our office, to Ms. Slomsky, if you want to receive a copy of that and put the two side by side. And the reason I say that, because it's relevant in the dispensation that we find ourselves in, not only here in Erie County or the city of Erie or the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but indeed in our country. And nobody really wants to talk about history as it really is. We talk about critical race theory, we talk all around the subject. We talk about Confederate heroes, but we don't really talk about the residual effects of racism that still affect my community, still affect my children as we sit here in 2022. So as we go forward, since we're all trying to see things through that prism, or it's stated that that's the prism that we see things through, I just thought that that would be a healthy reminder. As I look around this building, I walked in this building many a times as a kid. I grew up on 2nd and Sass, Attorney Sparrows. I'm in this building a lot, and my dad, made sure that we were civic-minded, and we had to understand it. And I always walk past, I'm in the courtrooms, I see all the white judges on the wall. I walk through the gauntlet of black and white pictures, of white wall, and so on. And just recently, in 10 years, I start to understand what space meant and how inviting spaces should be. And so it's not a very inviting space. One of the first things I did as a member of council, and Director of Administration Smith can attest to it, was I walked in, and we all have our county council pictures. I looked at all the black-white pictures that walked down, and at that time, when I first got here, they were still walking inmates through, Central Court. They were still shackled before COVID, and you'd see it looked like a chain gang of black and brown men walking in orange suits. And they would walk and they would line up. Some would be held upstairs till it was their time to come down to court. They would walk past all these white pictures in the hallway. You'll see them on your way out when you go down or on your way in. And I could look at their faces and they just look so hopeless. And I'd see the same look on their children's face. And I asked Mr. Smith, would he remove the order of the county council pictures, how they were on the wall, and would he put our office picture, our team picture, outside of that courtroom, so that at least a black defendant or brown man or woman, adult, going into that room would at least have some sense of face or space before they went there and they were tried or had received their hearing. Many times there was no one in the courtroom black, and the only thing black in the courtroom was the judge's robe or his hair. And so I felt it important that we, since we're looking at a prism, through the prism of equity, that I add a layer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me, Terry, you have some few words?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My little talk is going to be about Project Resolve. And there's not anybody sitting up here that thinks it's a bad idea. I went out there, saw what they're doing out there, listened to Ms. Bridger speak. I thought that's a speech she probably should have came in public in this courthouse, because it's an impressive project. But $5 million from us, that's a stretch. When I look at this budget, and when we look out in our communities, and when I say communities, Elk Creek, Fairview, Corey, it's not just the inner city. We have the means, we're supposed to have the means, to help the people of Erie County when we don't plow their streets. We help them when they're in need. I support this project, and I told Mrs. Bridger just a little while ago. She wants me to travel with her to speak about it, I will. But I will not use the $5 million of county funds for this project without taking the people of Erie County first. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to move to amend the agenda to move all items not budget related to the front, to the beginning of the agenda, and to move items A and B, second reading of ordinance number 145 and 146, to the very end of the agenda, pending the votes on the rest of the budget. So that is the motion.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. This is just a roll call on making an amendment to the agenda. Roll call vote, please.
On the amendment, Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes?
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. Ready to change gears? I think that takes us to old business, if I'm not correct.
Well, as we're going through, those are the two that we're holding, 145 and 146. So we'll move on to new business, starting with A in new business.
My bad, new business.
It's all right, we're working, like we said, nice and slow, working through this.
Okay, new business A, title only, first reading of ordinance 167.
First reading of ordinance number 167 of 2022, second 2022 planning fund budget supplemental appropriation of $50,000 from release of restricted Act 152 demolition funds.
Takes us to B, first reading of ordinance 168 in title only.
First reading of ordinance number 168 of 2022, 56 2022 general fund budget supplemental appropriation of $50,000 from release and transfer of restricted Act 152 demolition funds to the planning fund.
Takes us to C, first reading of ordinance 169 in title only.
First reading of ordinance number 169 of 2022, the third 2022 planning fund budget supplemental appropriation of $70,000 from release of restricted Act 137 affordable housing funds.
Takes us to D, first reading of ordinance 170 in title only.
First reading of ordinance number 170 of 2022, 57th 2022 general fund budget supplemental appropriation of $70,000 from release and transfer of restricted Act 137 affordable housing funds to the planning fund.
Okay, F, first reading of ordinance 171 title only.
First reading of ordinance number 171 of 2022, 58 2022 general fund budget supplemental appropriation of $850,000 for approved additional costs of contracted medical services for the Erie County Prison.
G, possible adoption of resolution number 48 title only.
Also adoption of resolution number 48 of 2022, approval of the redevelopment assistance capital grant application and the cooperation agreement among the Erie County General Authority, Shears of Waterford, and the County of Erie for the Shears of Waterford Industrial Building Project.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by Ms. Sharman, second by Mr. Scatella. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. And number H,
H, the possible adoption of resolution number 49 of 2022, approving the annual budget of the Erie Area Council of Governments for the calendar year ending December 31st, 2023.
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
I'm guilty of not paying attention.
Thank you for your honesty, sir.
I need to reflect my vote, my last vote to reflect yes.
Ms. Lomsky, did you catch that?
Mr. Horton will be a yes, okay?
Okay.
And again, that's on resolution number 48, correct?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's all right. Again, H, we've already read it, so
Need a motion on this one?
yeah, need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I got a first by Mr. Winarski, second by Mr. Scatella. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman. And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Now, do we want to do the possible sale now at this point?
Yes, please.
Okay, E, possible sale parcel number. You don't have to go into all the million numbers, just title only.
Thank you, sir. Possible sale of a parcel from the repository for unsold property.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by Showerman, second by Mr. Horton. Any discussion? Not seeing any, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman. Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. This takes us to I, possible appointment of Jonathan.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to table this appointment. With everything that's going on, I'd like to see us wait until the dust settles. And I hate to involve another individual in everything that's occurring. It's nothing negative with the appointment, just I think it's the wrong time.
Okay, I have a motion for a table. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, second.
You second that table?
No, I want to counter.
Well, we've already gone through that. Yeah, this is a motion to table. I have a first, I need a second.
Second.
I have a first and a second to table. I need a roll call vote on the table.
On the table, Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
No.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
No.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. And that the motion passed for a table.
That has been tabled before.
It has been tabled, thank you. Okay, this takes us to J, possible appointment of David A. Rubinio. Boy, I hope I pronounce that right. Title only.
Possible appointment of David A. Rubino to the Erie County Community College Board of Trustees.
I need a,
So moved.
there we go. Do I have a second?
Showerman, Winarski.
Jim, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. I don't hear yeses. So yes,
They're in a tough spot with that microphone.
and I understand that.
Second.
I try to watch. So I have a first by Ms. Sharman, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Well, this is the time where I usually say it's an adjournment and have a nice day, I'll take a motion, but unfortunately, it's not that.
Not so fast today.
Not so fast today.
This is where Amy's going to do a lot of talking.
We've been sitting for a long time. I'll accept the motion to just take a couple minute break. Someone needs, thank you. We're going to take a 15-minute break. See you back here in a couple minutes. All right. We'll put this back in motion. Thank you for letting us take a break. We appreciate it. We've been sitting up here a long time. Ms. Lonsky, where do you want to start?
Yep. Amy, we're thinking of starting right with the community college budget, right? Is that what you want to, or do you want to, you tell us?
Yes.
Okay, so we're starting with number C there under old business, ordinance number 147.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, see, second reading of ordinance number 147, title only.
Second reading of ordinance number 147 of 2022-2023 Erie County Community College budget.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first one to Sharman, and I'll give that one to Terry, Mr. Scatella. Any discussion? Not seeing any, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Okay, D, second reading of ordinance number 148.
Second reading of ordinance number 148 of 2022-2023 debt service fund budget.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first one to Sharman, second by Mr. Scatella.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I believe you'll need a motion for the action sheet to be included with the ordinance.
Okay. Let's get to that page.
So we're first going to do the ordinance that they just moved right now, this first and second, and then we'll do the action sheets all together as one.
We need a
We need a
motion to approve
There,
action sheet number 1 because it calls for an adjustment in
There's-
supporting details.
yes, there's nothing on it.
I believe you need a motion to amend the ordinance to include the action sheets as presented.
Okay.
And then, in this case,
Okay, that's probably my misunderstanding, so I apologize because this one was blank. I thought that it wasn't.
it's adjust supporting detail to match the budget, so it's,
And it's in there, right, okay. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I move to, we need a vote on it, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's an amendment.
All right, move to amend move to amend the debt service fund to include supporting detail, action sheet number 1.
Is that good? Like, I'm seeing Joe go like this. That must be a good idea. Okay, I got it.
Do we need a vote separately on the action sheet?
No, we're just amending it to accept it.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
On the amendment.
For roll call
And
vote
the
on
action
amendment. On the action sheet.
Okay. All right, we have Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, since
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
no change to the expense amount, you can go ahead and vote on the ordinance as amended.
Gotcha. Because we have a first and second on that, so now we can just vote that in up or down.
So the original first and second that we had on that was Showerman Scatella.
Correct.
Correct, okay. All right, making sure we have that straight there. Okay, Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. No.
No, we were good with the amendment to add the action sheet. But
This one just.
no, she's asking the previous one we just did.
So there was a motion to include the action sheet and then a motion to vote on it as amended.
For the debt service, we're still on D.
Right, right.
Now we're moving on at this point since we voted.
And this is how we need to do this, make sure it's done correctly. See, when I see Joe, this gray hair, I'm saying, "Let's- we're good." All right, takes us to E. This is a second reading of ordinance number 140, title only.
Second reading ordinance number 149 of 2022, 2023 Employee Fringe Benefit Fund Budget.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by Mr. Winarski, second by Mr. Scatella. Any discussion? I see the dream team over there with nothing, so that's good. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. This takes us to F, second reading of ordinance 150, title only, please.
Second reading of ordinance number 150 of 2022, 2023 Health Choices Fund Budget.
So moved.
Before we do that, though, we have the action sheets.
Yeah, we have several action sheets on this one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I move to vote on action sheets numbers 1 and 2 as one vote. I think it's just the 2.
It's just the 2, correct. So we have a first, I need a second. Any discussion on the action sheets, amending them? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. This takes us,
So that was on the amendment.
That was on.
The action sheets. Then you need
The
a
action sheets, yes.
motion to vote on the ordinance as amended.
right, we just had that.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we vote on the ordinance as amended.
Second.
I have a first and a second by Ms. Rennie, Mr. Winarski. Any discussion on the voting of the action sheets as they've been amended? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Now it takes us to G, second reading of ordinance 151, mental
Second.
health.
Second reading of ordinance number 151 of 2022, 2023 Mental Health Intellectual Disabilities Fund Budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to move to include action sheets 1 through 3 as one vote to be added to cover sheet.
Second.
I have a first and a second on the amendment of the action sheets. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
So again, this is just amending the action sheets as one. This is the first vote, and this one we'll have 3 on, correct?
2 on this.
2 on this one, okay. All right. We have Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Okay, we good with G?
We included all the action sheets.
That's
As
good.
amended.
Now, as amended.
Now we have to vote on the
And I would
Accepted.
like to move to vote on the ordinance as amended by the action sheets.
Second.
I have a first and second by Ms. Rennie, Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Takes us to H, second reading of ordinance 152.
That's what I thought, right? So this is the one with the 3 votes. So we need one more vote on 151?
No, just on the drug it up.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Okay. Ready, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. Second reading of ordinance number 152 of 2022. This is the Drug and Alcohol Abuse Fund budget. And as Mr. Maloney has said, we're going to need 3 votes on this one.
Okay.
This is 3 action sheets as one.
So just to clarify, so you're going to amend the ordinance to include the action sheets. If those all pass, then you're going to amend the expenditure amount on the ordinance, and then you'll vote on the ordinance as amended.
Right? The cover
That's why
sheet.
there's three.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance I would like to amend it to have a vote on all the action sheets, all three action sheets as one vote.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and I have a second on the amendment. Any questions on the amending only? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Okay, now we need a vote on the action sheet.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
per those action sheets, the updated expenditures for the Drug and Alcohol Fund are $7,523,756.
Okay.
We need a motion to accept. Change the cover sheet. Mr. Chairman, I move to change the cover sheet with the amount given to us as a result of the action sheets.
I have a first and a second.
Second.
I have a first by Ms. Rennie, second by Mr. Narski. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we accept the ordinance as amended with the new information.
I have a first, I need a second.
Second.
Ms. Rennie and Ms. Showerman, any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Takes us to I. Second reading of ordinance 153, title only.
Second reading of ordinance number 153 of 2022, 2023 Children and Youth Services Fund Budget.
And we have a lot of action sheets on this one.
We do. Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
if I'm understanding this correctly, I would like to move that we move action sheets, is it 1 through 12?
Yes, ma'am.
1 through 12 as one vote. And then 13 and 14 also together as one vote.
I have a motion and a second.
Second.
I have a first by Ms. Rennie, second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on grouping them together.
We're grouping them together. Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
The next step would be to vote on action sheets 1 through 12.
We have to vote, you need an amendment. There you go, to vote from 1 through 12.
I would like to move that we vote on action sheets 1 through 12, again, as one vote, amendment to the budget ordinance.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Next, you'll need a motion to vote on action sheets 13 and 14. As a reminder to council, these action sheets are to remove an additional pay increase requested in the budget for those two positions. And the net county cost would be a reduction of about $2,600.
Okay.
So we'll need a motion to vote on those two.
Just looking it over and
No.
catching up. Mr. Chair, I would like to move that we amend, or that we vote on action sheets numbers 13 and 14.
Second.
I have a first by Mr. Reddy, second by Mr. Winarski on the amendment. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
these are some of the changes that have been proposed by various departments. I actually will be voting in favor of this. Just going on the record.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Mary, you might want to look at those again. Those were the raises. Initially, you said it wasn't worthwhile to cut.
This is the,
So to clarify, a yes vote on this is to cut the raises that were requested in the budget.
these are the ones that are fully funded.
They're 80% funded by grant funding and 20% funded by the county.
Okay, you're right. I had come back on this earlier with the,
And that's okay. That's why we need to
That's
talk
why
about it.
I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Terry, you good on this one?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure.
What do you want to say?
Jim, you good? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
No.
Mr. Winarski.
No.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
No.
Mrs. Showerman.
No.
And Chairman Shank.
No. Okay.
Chairman Shank, would it help to read the action sheets? Would that help as we're going through here just to,
The way it seems to be working fine.
so we're good? Okay.
Because we don't need to go through them again and again. We just need to hit the highlights, remind people where they need to go, and make their vote.
When we have something like we just had, we'll just
Yes.
double check and slow it down.
Great.
Okay.
I think as we get to the ones where they're individual action sheets, that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jay?
Yes. The updated expenditure amount with action sheets run 1 through 12 as passed for the children and youth budget is $72,150,657.
Could you repeat that, Amy?
$72,150,657.
Thank you. Jay, title, do you have a question?
Yeah.
We need to move to.
But we need one more
amend the
vote.
Cover sheet.
Okay.
Okay, so I move that we amend the cover sheet by the numbers given to us by our accountant.
Okay, I have a first. Ms. Rennie and Ms. Showerman, any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
And this is on the amendment, amending the cover
Cover
sheet
sheet.
after we have the numbers in the account. Okay, so we're all on the same page. Okay, Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Okay, we good with aye? Now Jay.
No, you still need to, you need a motion to vote on the ordinance as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we vote on the ordinance as amended.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie and Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
As amended. Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
We're all set with the accountants. Right?
Dream team's ready. Okay.
All right. Second reading of ordinance number 154 of 2022-2023 Planning Fund Budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to amend the ordinance by adding action sheets 1 through 3 and voting on them as one vote.
I have a first and a second, Rennie and Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
The updated expenditures as a result of those action sheets for the planning fund budget is $8,315,884.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to amend the cover sheet by the figure given by our accountant. Move to amend it.
You're right, you still,
Julie, can I have a point of order on that one? We still need to vote on, we voted on grouping them.
Grouping them together, yes. And now this is the next step. Good.
Okay, so we do need a vote for approval.
You don't have to vote to group them. There's just one amendment. It's just 3 different pages. Don't do an extra vote just to group them. Vote on the 3, and then vote on the amended cover sheet.
Well, that will make it easier. Thanks, Joe.
Yes, you don't have to vote to group them.
Okay.
So this isn't the 3 that you were talking about before, though. So we're not doing 3 on this with the updated expenditures.
Well, you would vote, one vote on all 3 amendments, one vote on changing the cover sheet,
Right.
and one vote on the ordinance as amended.
So 3 votes, though.
Yes.
Yes. So we still need the 3 votes.
Right. So the first vote we had was on the amendments.
Mm-hmm.
The second one then should be on the cover sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So
And then on everything together as a whole.
Right, so
Yeah.
I move to change the cover sheet by the amount given by our
Yes, ma'am.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And this will be the final vote then for 154.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the ordinance as amended.
I have first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Second reading of ordinance number 155 of 2022, 2023 Domestic Relations Fund Budget.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
for this one, I believe you need 4 votes. You're going to want a motion to amend to include action sheets 1 through 4 and vote on as one. A motion to include action sheet 5, a motion to vote on to amend the cover sheet, and then a motion to vote on the ordinance as amended.
One through 4, a separate one on 1 through 5, a separate one on the cover sheet, and on the ordinance.
You got it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to move to vote on action sheets 1 through 4 together at this time.
And to amend the ordinance to include them.
To amend the ordinance to include action sheets 1 through 4.
And vote on them as one.
And vote on them as one. Thank you.
Okay, I have a first by Rennie and Znarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
So we're on the same page, like Amy said. Ordinance number 155, action sheets 1 through 4, voting them on all together as one. Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 5.
Okay, I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
just to clarify, so this action sheet was the action sheet to eliminate 2 vacant clerical positions within the Domestic Relations Fund that have been vacant since 2019. I just wanted to make sure that council was clear on what was being voted on.
We appreciate your footnote, we do. Okay, we need any more discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes.
The amended expenditures for the Domestic Relations Fund is $5,620,962.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move that we amend the cover sheet by the amount given by our accountant.
I need a second.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Mr. Bale. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mrs. Horton, or Mrs. Horton, excuse me, Mr. Horton. I thought Mrs. Horton was here today, I'm sorry. Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes. This one's the ordinance.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept ordinance number 155. Yeah, 155
As amended.
as amended. Thank you.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
This is on number 155 as amended. Right here, let's see. Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes. Takes us to L.
Second reading of ordinance number 156 of 2022-2023 library fund budget.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to amend the ordinance by including action sheets number 1 and 3 as one vote.
I need a second. I have a first by Ms. Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion for 1 and 3 amendment? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes.
The expenditures as amended for the library fund budget are $8,276,404.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move that we amend the cover sheet to include that figure.
Second.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on that amendment.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to accept ordinance number 156 as amended.
Second.
I have first by Rennie, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes.
Do we want to take a breather? Are we good?
Oh, you.
Is good? Okay.
That's why I leave it to you, because it's like, when you're caught up, you can,
Just making sure everybody's all right.
we're good. Terry, good? Okay.
Okay. Second reading of ordinance number 157 of 2022, the 2023 Public Health Fund budget.
This one's a big one.
It's- Mr. Chairman, I would like, I would like to move to amend the action sheet with, or, excuse me, amend the cover sheet with action sheets number 111, 1 through 11, taken as one vote.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Sharman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
The amended expenditures for the Public Health Fund are $17,161,545.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the cover sheet to reflect that figure.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move to accept ordinance 157 as amended.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. And,
Everybody good?
very good?
Okay.
And,
Second reading of ordinance number 158 of 2022, 2023 Public Safety Fund Budget.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
I would like to move to amend the ordinance by adding in action sheets numbers 1 through 7 and grouping them as one vote.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
The expenditures as amended for the Public Safety Fund are $9,882,344.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the cover sheet by that amount, or with that numbers reflecting that amount.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept ordinance 158 as amended.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Perfect.
We all good on that one? Yep, got thumbs up.
Giving those thumbs up. That's
I
really
did,
good, Sharon.
appreciate that. Oh, title only.
Okay. Oh, second reading of ordinance number 159 of 2022, 2023 Gaming Fund Budget.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
just as a point of clarity, all of these action sheets are going to be voted on individually. So you'll need a motion for each one.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we vote on action sheet number 1, and I think I should read what the intent is. Thank you.
Motion to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 1.
Motion to amend the ordinance by including action sheet number 1, which states that all line items which have a zero balance and are eliminated and are not available for transfers.
Got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And Amy will go through these one by one. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 2 to increase the grant to Youth Summer Jobs Program to $263,200.
So moved.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Bale?
No.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I would
Yes.
like to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 3, which increases the grant to GCAC Area Agency on Aging to $462,871.
Second.
I have first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to amend the ordinance by including action sheet number 4, which is to increase the grant to GCAC to $266,240.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
No.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 5, which is to increase the grant to Erie Together to $25,000.
Second.
I have first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
No.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the agenda to include action sheet number 6, which is to increase the grant to the cooperative extension to $180,000.
Second.
Mr. Chair, just for a point of clarity, Mrs. Rennie, you said amend the agenda, and I just want to clarify that we're amending the ordinance, just to make sure that we're crossing or...
I'm sorry. Repeat that, Amy.
When you spoke, you said you wanted to make a motion to amend the agenda rather than a motion to amend the ordinance.
The ordinance. Thank you.
I just wanted you to be able to...
Thank
And
you.
that's why we like you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
All right, so I had a motion. Did I have a second on that?
Yeah.
Yep. Horton gives a yep. Good enough for me for that. Any discussion?
On amending the ordinance.
Right.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 7, which is to decrease the grant to Youth Leadership Institute by $25,000, which leaves a balance of $20,000.
I need a second.
Second.
Thank you. I have a first by Rennie, second by Bale. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please. The amendment.
On the amendment, Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
No.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatello,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 8, which is to decrease the grant to Police Athletic League by $12,500, leaving a balance of $12,500.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatello,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 9, which is to decrease the grant to St. Paul's Clinic by $7,500, leaving a balance of $12,500, which is what they initially requested.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton,
No.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman, Mr. Scatello,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance by adding in action sheet number 10, which is to increase the grant to Mecca to $30,000.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman, Mr. Scatello,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance by adding in action sheet number 11, which is to increase the grant to Erie Together by $300,000 to be used for youth workforce development. I don't believe this was struck.
It was not.
It was not, okay. And this is separate from the other action sheet on Erie Together. Thank you.
I have a first and a second.
Do we want clarification from the accountants on that?
If you vote yes on
Would you mind speaking to the microphone, Mr. Maloney?
If you vote yes on this, you're going to have 2 job programs.
Discussion.
Did you say something?
Discussion. Are we opening for the discussion?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair,
Oh,
did you have a second? Mary moved.
Yeah, we had a first and a second, Mr. Winarski, I believe. Yeah, and so yeah, it was a discussion, so yeah, we have a discussion. Andre?
Sure.
Please speak into your microphone.
Guilty as charged. Sure. I want to discuss it because, it's to my understanding, first you have to should be a 501c3 to be eligible for the funds. Clearly, Erie Together is not, because they have a fiscal agent in JCAC who actually administers the summer jobs program. So we would not be able to transfer any money, much less $300,000, to an entity who is set up to receive such. JCAC is in Erie Together. Erie Together has been under the umbrella of JCAC since its foundation, and it just doesn't look right to take an underling and try to usurp, for all practical purposes, the parent company's duties. And so I would ask that this be struck, but in the event that it is, we already have a motion on the floor, I won't be supporting this.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say a few words on this. I did talk with the administrator of Erie Together, and they are not prepared to conduct a replacement of the summer jobs program. They would be willing to work in conjunction with the Summer Jam program to help facilitate student success across the programs that they do conduct, but they are not able to put forward a proposal at this time to conduct a separate Summer Jam program. I'm going to vote no on it. However, this might be something we look at with some of the additional ARPA money down the line if it remains unallocated, and perhaps we would like to seek proposals to do something different. I think it's an exciting possibility. I think it's just not ready for prime time at this point. Thank you. I'm going to be voting no.
Anybody else? Seeing none, need a roll call vote.
Just to clarify, though, it was a first by Mrs. Rennie, and Mr. Winarski, you were a second. Okay, just making sure we have that. All right. We have Mrs. Showerman.
No.
Mr. Scatelli.
No.
Mr. Winarski.
No.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
No.
And Chairman Schenk.
No.
And Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by including action sheet number 12. And this is to remove the transfer of $2,152,686. Amy, do you have a
This action sheet is to remove the transfer of $2,152,686. This transfer to the general fund was to help plug the deficit, essentially. So this amount is currently being pulled from the gaming fund to balance the general fund budget. We had extensive discussion about whether or not the gaming fund should be used to do that, or so that's what that action sheet is for. Are there any questions on that?
I do. We need an amended amount, I think, on total.
Well, there's,
This amount specifically is just what is currently being used to balance the budget. It has nothing to do with the grants. The total current transfer, may I pull that up?
this would have to do the same action sheet on the general fund, and there's an action sheet for this, reducing the revenue by reducing the transfer by the
Okay.
So right now, the current transfer from the gaming fund to the general fund is $3,207,328,000 for all of the action sheets that were passed that either increased or decreased that amount.
Is that including the $2 million?
That $3 million includes the $2 million.
Okay. Could you give that again one more time? Hold on.
$3,207,328. Right now, I can give you an updated number on that. One moment, please. So right now, with the action sheets passed, the current transfer to the general fund would be $4,389,639.
Thank you. Okay, so let me restate that then. Move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 12 for $2,152,686 appropriated to the general fund. Is that correct?
Yes. Is that all right? Gotcha. So I have a first and a second.
Second.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Bale. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I will not be voting in favor of this. The county has a commitment to support the community college, and Some of us supported it, some of us didn't support it. The fact is that sorry, Joe, did you?
As a clarification, voting yes on this would be to eliminate the transfer.
To eliminate the transfer?
Yes. So a yes is to eliminate the transfer. The transfer currently exists.
Yes means no.
Yes means eliminating the transfer.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for the correction.
So
I
you-
will be voting in favor of it then, because I do not believe that this funding from gaming revenue should be plugging holes in the budget, because it has already been committed to other things, including the community college. And that is not something that the county can get out of. That is a legal commitment. So I will be voting in favor to remove the transfer.
See, Terry, this is exactly what we talked about. No means yes, yes means no.
I'll take that class.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I too will be voting yes on this. We do have a prior commitment that we said we would sponsor the community college, be responsible for 1/3 of it. Gaming revenue comes in at the clip of about $5.5 million to us, and we've committed $4 million to. And I'm concerned that this seems to be a practice or a road that we're going down when we promise things, or specifically when we promise funds and then we retract it. It's not a good look. So I will be supporting this too. I don't think that balancing the budget with funds that have already been previously committed is good business.
Anybody else on the discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
No.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
No.
And Chairman Shank.
No.
And Mr. Chair,
Just for a point of clarification, I'm gonna pop in. So in caucus, we had discussed whether or not council wanted to decrease the transfer in the general fund by the amount that is currently being pulled from fund balance. That amount right now is $2,896,158. That is the total amount that is being pulled from the gaming fund balance in order to fund the grants that were approved today, and that also includes the transfer to the general fund of that $2 million. So we had discussed whether or not council wanted to make an action sheet to decrease the transfer to the general fund for the grants.
The discussion was that you wanted to get away with gaming funding all these grants to a certain extent. Maybe cut that down every year.
Push them back to the general fund where they used to
Yes.
right? Now, my thought was that we would have an amount.
$743,472. 743,472 is the amount. So right now, the total fund balance appropriated would be $2,896,158. If I subtract the $2,152,686 that's currently being already transferred to the general fund, that difference is $743,472. So that would be the excess of the grants. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. That would be the excess of the grants.
So let me get it straight. An action sheet would be to remove 743.
To decrease the transfer to the general fund by that amount. So in effect, the grants in the general fund would be being funded by at $743,472 by general fund balance instead of gaming fund balance.
And
It'd
that,
be a partial reduction of the grant in the general fund. A portion of the grants in the general fund now will be funded by general fund balance.
okay. And that would be a reduction of that end of it.
So it'd be do a gradual drawdown, so 3 or 4 years, all the money will be coming to the general fund.
So I propose to add in an action sheet decreasing the transfer to the general fund by the amount of $743,472.
Yes.
Thank you. And I do make that
I second.
motion.
I second.
Paul, you look,
Well,
you confused.
I guess in looking through the action sheets, and I've been at all the meetings, I know, Joe, you proposed cutting back on the transfer from the gaming, but I don't know that we really ever talked about it. We have that proposal.
That's what they just talked
It's
about.
not anything that you, it's something that we would decide.
Well, I would have to use that in preparing the budget.
Right.
And I have to think next year, the year after, and the year after, when I am preparing this budget.
Right.
So,
And we're looking at this year, what's been presented to
Okay.
us and dealing with it accordingly. So any discussion that we had informally or formally.
Informally,
was then, and we're right here, we're right here right now. You know, this is happening now.
correct.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we just had an amendment to add all these. Now, do we have to vote them in, correct?
We have to vote on that last motion.
Last motion.
743,000.
The addition.
Mary just made a motion to add an additional action sheet to decrease the transfer to the general fund by $743,472.
And I make that, well, let's just do it. I can-
Yeah, 'cause we had a first.
Under discussion.
Yeah, we had a first, we had a second by Mr. Horton. That brings us to discussion, so go ahead.
All right. The reason I do this is that the money released through the gaming fund, grants to other organizations, is not sustainable over time. The county has to choose what it will include within its operational budget. Much of the things that you now know as competitive grant process were actually part of the operational budget years ago. Then when the county received the gaming money, a lot of it was removed and put into this separate line. But in fact, many of these things are funded throughout the state by most other counties. Things like the Area Agency on Aging, that is funded by most counties throughout Pennsylvania. And there are many others within that category as well. We've reduced them to coming sort of hat in hand to us, but in fact, it is a responsibility of county government, and it should be included within the operational budget. The grants to other organizations, my hope is that we would see that reduced to almost nothing, if not completely eliminated, because to me it is the equivalent of walking around money. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's proper. And so I would like to see the dependence on this type of grant funding reduced dramatically, and have the county assume its responsibilities and obligations, or decide what stays and what goes. And that's going to be a tougher decision down the road. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Shane. Let me say, I agree with most of what my colleague just articulated. However, I differentiate in terms of what the grant money was intended for. I remember the lawsuit. I remember the lead assets that received half of the restricted funding. And I know that the unrestricted funding was intended to fund some of these things that we're funding, albeit they were incorporated into, many of them were incorporated into the general budget, and that's how they did it when I arrived here. Changed the process a little bit, but the unrestricted funds allow for nonprofits, big or small, special projects that weren't included as a lead asset in the same manner that the Erie Zoo or the Convention Center or a number of other, the Art Museum and all of those things, where it's an opportunity to kind of level things up to our citizens, and not just big nonprofits and those who are already have money. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, roll call on Barry's.
From the accounts. All right. Mr. Winarski.
No.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
No.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
No.
The amended expenditure amount for the gaming fund is $13,900,158.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to move to amend the cover sheet to reflect that amount.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to accept ordinance number 159 as amended.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
All right, we'll start from the top. Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Okay, we should be on. Is that correct?
We are moving along.
160. Second reading ordinance number 160, title only.
Second reading ordinance number 160 of 2022-2023 liquid fuels fund budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 1, which is to adjust the supporting detail to match the budget.
I have a first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
And I'm sorry, who was the second? Ellen, okay.
Showerman, sorry.
We're good. All right, Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Amy, is there any change to the cover sheet at all from that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Then I would like to move to accept ordinance 160 as it reads.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. This takes us to ordinance number 161, Pleasant Ridge Manor.
Second reading ordinance number 161 of 2022-2023 Pleasant Ridge Manor operating fund budget.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 1, which states that all line items having a zero balance are eliminated and are not available for transfers.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Second reading ordinance number 161, title only, please.
Just have to move to.
One more.
approve it.
Almost there.
Okay, and this, there is no change.
There is no change.
Okay, I would like to move to accept ordinance number 161 as it reads.
Second.
First by Rennie, second by Mr. Winarski. Discussion.
Just to clarify, that should be a motion as amended because you amended it to add the action sheet, but there's no, the expenditure doesn't change.
Okay, all right, thank you. I thought, anyway.
Was that the same for the one previous? Because I don't know if it was as amended or was read.
I thought if it didn't change the numbers, that
Because the didn't change the numbers, like the previous one was as amended. We did the action sheet for 160, then we voted as amended. Now we're doing the action sheet for 161, then as amended, right?
I think 160 though we voted as read as well because there was no change. I think that's what I heard from just want to make sure.
Yeah, good point. Point of clarification. No, absolutely. But we did amend because we had to add the action sheet for both of them.
So it's
good. Thank you,
as
Councilman.
amended because you're adding the action sheet. Yes.
those should be as amended, all right.
Thank you, Councilman.
And we had a first and second, we had a discussion, and then roll call.
Unanimous. Ordinance number 161 as amended. Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
keeping rules, I realize it's a small point. Do we need to take a second vote on number 160 as amended?
No, go ahead.
Ronnie, that's up to you. That's really technical, very technical
Yeah.
issue.
You don't think so? Okay,
It says read.
okay.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Good. All right, let's try that again. Second reading ordinance number 162, please.
Second reading ordinance number 162 of 2022, 2023 Pleasant Ridge Manor Depreciation Fund Budget.
There are no action sheets for this one.
Yeah, there is no action sheet. Thought maybe I got missed.
Mr. Chair, I move to accept ordinance 161,
162.
160, okay, 162, thank you.
Yeah, we got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Don't you wish they were all that simple?
Right?
So that takes us to ordinance number 163.
Second reading, ordinance number 163 of 2022, 2023 Erie County Care Management Budget.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance to include action sheets numbers 1 through 4 voted on as one.
I got a first and a second. Rennie, Showerman, any discussion? And do we need to talk about number 4 because it's to adjust the wage increase for all positions from 5 to 3? Just a friendly reminder on that. So, we have a first.
You moved to vote on those all as one, so your vote is going to be for all 4.
Gotcha. I just want people to actually take a minute and look at it.
Yes.
So I have a first and second. We had discussion. Roll call vote.
And again, this is to amend to vote all 4 as one.
All 3.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to accept ordinance number 160.
Excuse me, we have to amend the expenditure amount.
Thank you.
The amended expenditure amount for the Erie County Care Management Fund is $22,446,997. 22446997.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the cover sheet to reflect that amount.
Second.
I have a first by Reddy, second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And finally, I would like to move to accept ordinance number 163 as amended.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman. Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Next.
Are we good, or we need to take a breather before we go into this one?
Actually,
Yeah, I'll have a motion for a 15-minute break. Thanks for the little break, we appreciate it. We're just people too. We're gonna leave off, Ms. Slomsky.
Okay. So we have pretty much got a lot of progress here with moving on, right? Okay, we are here moving on through 163 was where we left off. And now we're going to move on to second reading of ordinance number 164, the 2023 American Rescue Plan Fund budget.
It's my understanding we're going to be going through these action sheet by action sheet.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I move to amend the ordinance with action sheet number 1, stating that all line items which have a zero balance are eliminated.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? See none, roll call vote.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number 2, did we have a question on that one?
We pulled it.
We pulled that one? Love doing that.
Mr. Chair, I would like to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 3 to account for the receipt of additional grant funds through the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund.
Second.
I've got a first. Rennie, second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion?
Discussion.
Mr. Horton.
Just as previously stated, I don't know what this is. I do want to support the administration. It's just a nominal.
You need to use your microphone.
It's just a nominal amount of money, $50,000. But still, as with many of the others, we're still working details. So I'll be voting on this.
Thank you. Anybody else?
And just for clarification, we're not spending this money, we're just accepting it.
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by adding action sheet number 4 to increase the appropriation to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Fund to $3,500,000. Funds to not be dispersed until at least 2/3 of the board is seated and must align with ARPA guidelines.
Second.
We've got a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I know this is a very controversial topic, and I am interested in seeing them succeed, and I want to give them money, but I feel like we have to get everything straightened out with their board and get things back into place and then discuss money.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
There are actually 2 action sheets covering this, and I understand the concerns about the DEI Commission, but let's be honest, the problems with the DEI Commission have been created, I believe, by the administration. So I do have a second action sheet in here. I do believe that funding does need to be dedicated to the work of the DEI. I agree that legal efforts are being mounted right now, but the need still exists. And in fact, I believe that it is vital. I have included a second action sheet, number 5, which gives a different level of oversight, an increased level of oversight. And I think that it's a good compromise if people are uncomfortable with the first. And I would just put it out there. I will be voting in favor of the second action sheet. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I appreciate my colleagues' comments. It's a little unusual to talk about action sheet 5 while we're on action sheet 4. But with that said, I've heard it said amongst my colleagues and the administration that we want to give this, we want to support the DEIC. We just want them to straighten things out before we give them funding. But yet we're taking that funding and we're diverting it to another entity. So my question would be, where would another $3.5 million come from, or $3 million come from, once they get it straightened out? I must also add that yes, they've made the steps. I remember a fruit guy, a fruit juice guy, came here, one of our economic development things. I remember Save a Lot in the Kohler beer plant. Some of those entities are still receiving money, didn't have a burp, didn't hear a peep out of anyone. It's offensive. Almost saying like black people don't know how to handle money. Might be true on some level since black people rarely have money, as indicated by our vital statistics and our census. And so I don't know what straightened out means or when we'll get it, or we'll give it to them, or want to give it to them when they straighten it out. But I can tell you, as a former NAACP president, my father and mother were both my mother in the 60s, my father in the 80s, in the 2000s, my brother currently is now. I can tell you a lot about delayed and denied. And so make no mistake about it, whether since we're talking about action sheet 5, whether we adopt this one or action sheet 5, the adoption of action sheet 5 does not do anything for the DEIC committee. If we adopt it, and we've had good partnerships with the Erie County Redevelopment Authority or entities that are suggested in 5. But again, I don't want to go through and read the whole resolution on racism as a health emergency crisis, but I will say that this board was created so that they wouldn't have to go to white funders and ask for money and jump through the hoops. Now with that said, I think that everybody up here has good intent. I don't think everyone up here has a great understanding of what has happened to black people. And make no mistake about it, it's something that happened to us. No, it was something that was done to black people. So it's not, black people don't own 2.7% of the housing stock, or 2.3 because they were inept in any of it, and they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They're not in the condition that they're in because they don't know how to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Many don't have boots. And so the DEIC Commission, I put it back in 3.5. I don't expect it to pass. But it gave me an opportunity to put it out there in the public domain. I don't think that it's in a closed environment or in a back room. I think that we should vote on it like everything so that the whole entire community, has an understanding of what the DEIC Commission objective was, irregardless of their missteps, which I don't agree with some of those things as well. But I don't throw babies out with bathwater. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
to
ma'am.
clarify, action sheet 7 is the similar action sheet, not action sheet 5. Didn't want there to be any misunderstanding.
Okay, apologies. And a point of clarification there, actually. Obviously, both action sheets could not pass. However, votes could be cast in favor of each one.
So we'll
Without
basically,
conflict.
we're going to go through the action sheets as they are in order, and I will update council as to what is left to be appropriated.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We had a first, we had a second, we had discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
No.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
No.
Mr. Bale.
No.
And Chairman Shank.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by adding action sheet number 5 to appropriate $750,000 to the Sabacchio Park project with the Erie County Redevelopment Authority acting as the fiscal agent.
So I got a first, I've got a second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance by including action sheet number 6 to appropriate $3 million to the Building a Better Future Initiative Fund, which is presently developed, managed, and administered through the Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority.
Second.
I've got a first by Ms. Rennie, second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
this is an update. There's currently $18,677,864 left that can be appropriated in the ARPA fund.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
And if you can say the figure one more time, 18 million,
Oh, you want the whole number?
the figure one more time.
$18,677,864.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by including action sheet number 7 to appropriate $3 million to be administered by the Erie County Redevelopment Authority for the purposes of diversity, equity, and inclusion of the Erie County BIPOC communities. They would be charged with working with the DEI Commission in developing and facilitating programs, services, initiatives, et cetera, towards this end.
Second.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion?
Discussion.
Yes, sir.
The bottom line of that narrative is funds to not be dispersed until a plan for how the funds are to be utilized is submitted to and approved by county council. And I think that's an overreach. I don't know that we do that with any other commission or authority or board. And I would suggest that if we don't do that with every other authority, commission, or board, that we either include that language for those boards and authorities, or we eliminate this language for this commission. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to reiterate that I do want them to succeed. I agree with Councilman Horton that they should be able to have control of their own funds, but I feel like this point in time is not the time to disperse this money, and when they get fully functional again and everything is settled, that's the time to have this discussion.
Point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if this, when this money, should this action sheet pass, it won't be the EIC getting their stuff together. It will be the Erie County Redevelopment Authority working in conjunction with the DEIC. And again, I say that last sentence is inappropriate and it's biased unless it's going to be applied across the board to all authorities, boards, and commissions. And I believe that the Erie County Redevelopment Authority has demonstrated that they're a good partner in they should have to come back. They're an autonomous. They're autonomous. They shouldn't have to come back and ask. If we're going to give them the money, we can give them the money. They shouldn't have to come back and have county council micromanage that.
Mr. Horton, just a point of clarification. If you choose to take the verbiage out, you can make an amendment to it, or you just vote it up or vote it down.
Well, I understand that. I was waiting till there was other discussion, if there was other discussion, to make that motion to amend that language be removed. So thank you, Chairman Schenk, for that reminder.
Yeah. Anybody else? Mr. Chair, I knew you had something. I could see it in your eye.
We get up here and we talk about diversity. And there's always an excuse. What happened with DEIC, and one man caused it. Not us, not them, not anybody in the courthouse. How do we correct this? It's going to be a no vote every time, no matter what we try to do. It's ridiculous. And I yield back.
Okay.
So, we have Mr. Chair, we have a motion on the floor that's been moved and seconded. I need to seek legal counsel because I would like to make an amendment to that. So I'm at the mercy of this body.
If you want to do a little sidebar with our attorney, that'd be fine.
No, I don't need a sidebar. We can do it like right here.
Okay.
Now that there's a motion on the floor, is there room for me to amend it, this language, or do we have to vote as is?
I think you need to have a public hearing on that.
I beg your pardon?
You might not need, if you're going to amend this language, I think that you might need to have a fuller public hearing on this at a later time, I think.
No.
I think, the question.
Let me clarify.
Yeah.
If it's, listen, how about I try this procedure? I move that that action sheet number 7, the motion that's on the floor be accepted in its proper first. Would Mary and Ellen concede to a friendly amendment? That's, I think, how you do it. Yeah, okay, and they conceded to a friendly amendment, and so that friendly amendment would be to eliminate my funds to not be dispersed into a plan for how the funds are to be utilized. It's submitted to and approved by county council.
Okay, I've got a first. Do I have a second on the amendment?
It's a friendly amendment.
It's a friendly
As
amendment.
long as it's in order procedurally, I am agreeable to that.
It's at the will of council.
So we would vote just on the amendment and then,
Well, I say.
It would be a friendly amendment to their motion.
Right.
And so it would be part of it would be as if you had a first and second on it. It would
Okay.
not be.
It's not a
It would
separate.
not be, it would not be an additional amendment.
No.
It would be part of that original motion.
Part of the original, friendly amendment
So
to their
it's
original
already been
motion.
properly
Friendly
first and
amendment.
seconded, and it would be continued discussion and then the vote.
Okay.
I think the friendly amendment would remove the language without vote. Correct?
That would
Correct.
be my
That's
understanding.
my understanding.
Correct.
So just to confirm, I'm going to update the action sheet to remove the language that says funds to not be dispersed until a plan for how the funds are to be utilized is submitted to and approved by county council.
Yes.
Okay. We have a first and a second and a friendly amendment to that. Any more discussion? Roll call vote on the amendment and the friendly amendment.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
No.
Mr. Bale,
No.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
No.
and Chairman Schenk.
No.
So what we just voted on was no to this whole action sheet on number 7, because I don't think you all understood a friendly amendment. I think you all wanted yes for this thing, and you got caught up on the amendment language, which is really null and void because it was offered as a friendly amendment to the motion, first and second. That's Robert's rules, and so So what you just voted on was this entire, you didn't vote on the amendment. You voted on item 7, on action sheet 7. And that's it. There's no vote to say, oh, we're gonna amend this and take this language out, because we already offered up a friendly amendment that said that it would read as follows, and that this action sheet would go forward without those last 2 sentences. That's what you agreed to. We didn't just vote on the amendment. We voted on the actual action sheet.
So
They probably want a do-over. My colleagues probably don't want to vote no on this, but maybe they do. So I don't know. I'm speaking on, or it can stand as is.
Does any council member want to redo that?
Well, as I said before any of the voting took place, I want to refrain from allocating money to the DEI until they're whole and everything is back and functioning. So my vote stands as a no.
Your vote stands. Chairman Shank?
Yes.
Stands. Councilman Bagel?
Yes,
Councilman
to the
Wonarski? Okay.
Okay. Moving on to number 8.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by adding action sheet number 8, which is to appropriate $3 million to the Erie County Redevelopment Authority for the acquisition and/or redevelopment of a portfolio of parcels in order to attract businesses to Erie County.
Second.
I've got a first by Ms. Reddy, second by Mr. Wisniewski. Any comments? Yes, Mr. Horton.
Please use your microphone.
Sorry about that. Yeah, great project, great entity, great organizations. My issue is with the 70% in municipalities outside of the city of Erie. And the county is to have a security interest in any property acquired to be. So I have problems with that version. That's why I would like to support this item, voting.
Anybody else? Okay. I have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Wonarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
No.
Mr. Horton?
No.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just as an update, with that action passing, there's now $15,677,864 left.
Okay, thank you. Number 9.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by adding action sheet number 9 to appropriate $2 million for municipal gap funding to be administered by the Erie County Redevelopment Authority. This is in addition to the gap funding that was provided in the first round of funding, of ARPA funding.
Second.
I've got a first by Reddy, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale?
No.
Mr. Horton?
No.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Wonarski?
No.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes.
Can we get a count on that?
Was that 4 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative? Passed. 4-3.
4-3. Mr. Chairman, the updated amount to be appropriated is $13,677,864.
Thank you. Number 10.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance with action sheet number 10 to increase the transfer to the Public Safety Fund for the EMS Plan Administrator position, increase in pay approved by ordinance number 122. And that is in the amount of $5,588.
I've got a first by Ms. Rennie, second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Wonarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank?
Yes. Number 11.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance by introducing action sheet, number 11, to increase the homeless project grant by $2 million.
Mr. Chair, Just to clarify, we added funding to this action sheet per Mr. Horton that says funding to be distributed directly to homeless shelters for programming and support.
I'll take an amendment on the verbiage.
So moved.
All right. Got a first and second on that amendment on the verbiage. Can I have a roll call vote on the
We need
verbiage?
an amendment on the verbiage?
I don't believe we need an amendment on the verbiage.
Okay.
That,
Did you added it, and then we'll update it.
yes, I already added it.
Okay, never mind then. Mr. Horton, thank you. Okay, Mary, back to you. Got a first and a second. Any more discussion?
I would like to say something on this
Right.
one. This is one of those amounts that was placed in the ARPA bucket with very good intention, but there has been no program developed around this. There was some discussion of developing it with the help of the home team, and I believe that that still can happen. This is one of those items that I would prefer to see left off and remain unallocated for the time being in order to develop a program. And there are other action sheets that I believe this to be true as well.
Okay.
So I will not be voting in favor of this at this time, even though I support in general the project. I think it still needs to be developed.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any more discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Discussion. Our homeless population has grown. We spent in excess of $30 million last year in the renters assistance, utility assistance. Most of it went to slumlords. Our shelters are packed and full to capacity. Still have COVID. I think that money is needed, like right now. It's winter time. I don't think that this is something that should be put off. I have spoken with Mr. Barber briefly, with John DeManuel a month or so ago about the lead team, what their entities were doing. I see that we just awarded money to Mercy Hilltop Center for renovation to the tune of $250,000. I'm very, very happy we did that. But this $2 million, this $2 million is needed like right now. It's not needed like next week, next month, next year, or when we develop a plan. I submit to you for argument that every shelter in the city has a plan on books. They just don't have money. And so I asked for that verbiage to be included because I didn't want it to go to administrators or to go to, I think that $2 million should go directly to those with boots on the ground and to those clients or those members of that demographic who so desperately need help. So I will be voting to support this. And I'll be asking also that wish that Mr. Jones had not left, because I know that there was a work in progress between St. Martin Center, JCAP, and Erie County Case Management, which are three of our county community partners that work in that space and in that well. So I will be supporting this, and I happen to know that there are a number of shelters that are waiting for an opportunity to access any funding.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie,
No.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
No.
Mr. Bale,
No.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Chairman Schenk.
Yes.
Ms. Slomski. Vote, tally.
Clarification, 4 in the affirmative and 3 in the negative. That had passed.
I will change mine to yes.
Okay? We 5-2 on that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
as an update, there's $11,672,276 that can be appropriated.
Okay, number 12.
Mr. Chair, I would like to amend the ordinance with action sheet number 12 to increase the public safety asset grants by $150,000 to complete the radio light project.
I got it first by Freddie, second by Sharman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance to include action sheet number 13, which is to grant $737,500 to the Beehive Network, funds to be administered by the Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority.
I have a first, I get a second. Second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, just as an update, it's $10,787,000 left to appropriate.
Number 14.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance with action sheet number 14 to grant $250,000 to the Mercy Center for Women to be used towards Phase 3 of the Mercy Anchor Community Center renovations.
Second.
I have a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number 15.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the ordinance with action sheet number 15, which is to grant $1 million to the Erie County Conservation District as match funds for the Great Lakes cleanup and clean water programs for the agriculture community.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Just as a clarification, per discussion in caucus, we added the language funds to be restricted until a proposal is received by the Erie County Conservation District.
Thank you. Everybody clear on that? I've got a first, I need a second. Mr. Horton? I'm sorry. Okay, I need a second. Thank you, Mr. Bale. I have a first and second discussion.
Yeah, real quick, American Rescue Plans were,
Microphone, please.
American Rescue Plans were intended for those communities, those entities that were most negatively impacted by this pandemic. I can't, in good conscience, strip away the DEIs, stay up here and vote for $1 million. Something that I don't have details. I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
just doing a count. The remaining action sheets for the American Rescue Plan Act, all of them are short on details. We have received no proposals whatsoever. No one has spoken to us about them. I would propose, I'm going to vote no on this, but I would propose holding over the remaining ARPA funds to be unallocated at this time and held over until we receive actual proposals, not to restrict them within these lines, but to keep it open.
Okay, let's get through 15 and then we, do I
I'm going to be voting no on that.
have a second?
What was the motion?
Well, originally it was Rennie Bale for the.
Oh, it was Bill. I'm sorry. Yes, I had a first and a second. We had discussion. Anybody else? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
No.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
No.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And that does pass 4-3 in the affirmative.
Okay, now we can discuss the rest of them.
We're going to balance.
$9,534,776.
Okay.
Before we go on to the next one, may I just make a comment, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
We're going to vote on my colleague is just asked us about 3 or 4 of these that are coming that seem to be short on, or actually don't have any details. I'm just a little taken aback that we would talk about giving sums of $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, without asking details. And it seems like you should want the same details from those projects that you want from the DEIC, and that just don't seem right. So we're gonna give the DEIC the scrutiny over $3 million or $3.5 million. We're gonna break them over the coals, make them jump through every hoop, do backflips and slip and slides. We're gonna vote on all this money with no details, and I just wanted to put that out there for consideration from the dais.
That's up, yeah, it's up to you guys.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion to strike the remaining action sheets 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. That's it, 16 through 20.
Okay, I've got a first, I need a second.
Second.
I have a first by Reddy, second by Scatella. Any discussion? Roll call vote to strike.
Okay, on the strike, Mr. Horton,
Yes, right.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
So just as a point of clarification, we just won't have motions to add those to the ordinance, so we're essentially just pulling all of those. So we're pulling 16 through 20, no need to vote any additionally on that.
What's the sum of all those?
Of the ones pulled, $18,750,000 was the sum of all of those. Excuse me, I just need to update my notes.
So we were about to appropriate $18.75 million.
We're not.
I
We
know
just,
we're not now, but had we gone forward,
I mean, we have to
we would appropriate
approve the
that.
budget or not.
we wouldn't have been able to appropriate all of it. There was more than there was available. That puts us to action sheet number 21.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I would like to amend the ordinance, adding action sheet number 21 to adjust the supporting detail to match the budget,
You could also group 22 if you would like.
to reclassify ARPA grant income line to fund balance, appropriated line since funds have already been received and are being rolled forward from 2022.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman, Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And Amy, no.
The updated expenditure amount for the American Rescue Plan Act Fund is $16,705,975.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I move to amend the face sheet to reflect that number.
Second.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Showerman or Winarski? Showerman, okay.
I heard her, he's down there.
Gotcha. I'm making sure. Okay. All right. Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. Okay.
Did you need a motion on the ordinance as amended?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move to approve the ordinance number 164 as amended.
Second.
I got a first by Reddy, second by Mr. Arski. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Takes us to number 165.
Second reading of ordinance number 165, 2022, 2023 general fund budget.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the ordinance by including action sheets numbers 1 through 27 voted on as one.
First by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? That was 27, correct?
1 through 27.
That's correct.
There was one note that I had on 26.
I can't hear you. Can you please speak into your mic?
I'm sorry. There was a note I had written on number 26, though, to change the language to strike that word. Is that covered?
I have updated the action sheet on number 26 to read and change to upgrade position number 001030-001 election office supervisor to NB 16 from NB 15 and change the title to Director of Elections.
Right, so we are voting on the correction.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, any more discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. For
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
And I have each of these individually marked. Does anyone have any disagreement with that?
We do them individually.
The only ones we mentioned grouping were 48 through 53 and then 54 through 56.
'48 through 53, I do have that. And what was the second one, Amy?
54 through 56.
Okay. Would like to move to amend the ordinance, introducing action sheet number 28, reduce travel to $15,000 in the county executive's fine.
I've got a first and a second. Rennie, Showerman, any discussions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. 29.
Action sheet number 29, to amend the ordinance by reducing employee recognition by $1,500 to $2,500 in the balance.
Second.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Amending the ordinance by action sheet 30 to reduce travel to $15,000 in Community Relations and Economic Development Bureau.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman. Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. 31.
Amending it with action sheet 31 to reduce professional fees by $100,000 to $26,036.
I got it first by Rennie, second by Sharon. Any
Mr.
discussion?
Chair, I just wanted to clarify. So for action sheets 31 and 32, those compete with 33. So 31 and 32 are reducing the lines and partially restricting. 33 is not reducing but restricting all of those lines. So I just wanted to point out to council to keep that in mind for those 3 action sheets. So 31 is to reduce the line, 33 is restricting the line.
Okay. I've got a first and a second on 31. We were in discussion. Anything else?
I would like to say something for discussion purposes. You know, I don't think it makes sense to leave the lines this high when they are undefined. My thought is that if the administration wants to come back and request a supplemental appropriation later in the year, they could always do that. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, roll call vote at number 31.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
No. Number 32. We just
32 passed, right?
I'm sorry, that was 31, we're on 32 now.
we're on 32.
The 31 passed.
31 passed.
Yes.
So the only thing to be decided by 32, action sheet 32 would amend the ordinance by reducing it, which we've already done, but it would restrict the remaining 20,000.
No, so action 31 was to reduce professional fees. Action 32 is to reduce economic development initiatives by 80,000 and restrict 20,000. They're 2 different lines.
Okay, I thought we had,
Action sheet 33 restricted both of those lines.
gotcha. Okay, thank you for the clarification. All right, to reduce economic development initiatives by $80,000 and restrict $20,000 remaining.
I got a first by Rennie, second by Horton. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Again, I think this is another line that offers the possibility of making the cut and holding it out for the possibility of a supplemental appropriation should something present itself. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
No.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number
Mr. Shank?
33, yes.
I would recommend pulling number 33 because those funds, the amounts don't match up. We could amend the language, but
Is everybody okay pulling it? Cheap seats, you guys good? Okay. 32. All right, takes us to 34.
Action sheet number, amending the ordinance with action sheet number 34 to reduce professional fees to reflect 3% raises for all county solicitors.
Second.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. 35.
Amending the ordinance by action sheet number 35 to reduce professional fees by $50,000 to $40,000
Second.
in human resources.
in human resources. Thank you.
That's okay. I got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. 36.
I would like to propose pulling action sheet number 36, striking it.
Okay, I got a first, I got a second. Any discussion?
You don't have to vote.
Okay, have a nice day.
Is there anybody who wanted, if you're all good about pulling it?
Just gonna pull, yeah. We're not getting rid of it.
Just for clarification for the public, action sheet 36 was to eliminate the talent acquisition manager position, but it has been pulled.
Okay, 37.
Action sheet number 37, to eliminate a position. I don't know if it's important that I read the number that was created as a DEI specialist position, shifted to HR generalist. It is currently vacant.
I've got first. All right, ready, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman, Mr. Scatella,
No.
Mr. Winarski,
No.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Action sheet 38 will be pulled since the previous action sheet was passed.
Thank you. Action sheet number 39, to amend by eliminating the new deputy director position requested in the budget under revenue tax claim.
I've got a first and a second. Any discussion? Before we go any farther, just to let people know, this is to eliminate a new deputy director's position.
So this position was requested in the budget. It doesn't currently exist in the 22 budget. It was a brand new position.
Gotcha. So make sure yes means no. Get rid
If
of
you
it.
vote yes, you're voting to eliminate the position.
There you go. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes, number 40.
Number 40 needs to be pulled.
Number 41.
Amending the ordinance with action sheet number 41 to eliminate new general maintenance position requested in the budget. And is this 2 positions, I believe?
There's 2 lines. There's one for each position. So if it's the will of council, you could group 41 and 42, or you can, there were 2 new positions requested in the budget.
Let's take them one at a time.
Okay. I've got a first and a second. I got Rennie and Showerman. Any discussion? Roll call vote on eliminating a new general maintenance position.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number 42.
Action sheet number 42 to eliminate a new general maintenance position. Again, separate line, but a general maintenance position requested in the budget.
I've got a first for Rennie, second Showerman. Any discussion on elimination of a new general maintenance position? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella,
Yes.
Mr. Winarski,
Yes.
Mr. Bale,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie,
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman,
Yes.
and Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Action sheet number 43 to amend the ordinance by removing additional increase in pay step for position 005 within the information technology line, county network administrator.
As a clarification, this position received greater than a 3% increase in the budget. A higher pay raise was requested. This action sheet is to eliminate the additional pay raise, so this position would still get a 3% increase.
Okay, we got a first and a second. I got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote and removal additional increase.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman? Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number 44.
Action sheet number 44 to amend the ordinance by eliminating the new cybersecurity administrator position requested in the budget. This is for information technology.
I've got a first, I've got a second. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
This is a new position.
This is a new position for their cybersecurity administrator. They're asking to hire somebody.
To hire somebody to protect our 911 system.
It's
Right?
IT.
IT, yeah, all that.
He's supposed to be an expert.
Right.
How do we keep that?
If you vote no to keep it, you vote yes to eliminate it.
No means to keep him.
No means to keep.
There we go. Thank you for asking, though. That's a great question. No, it really is. Okay, any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, I
Yes,
am
ma'am.
supporting the elimination of this position. Actually, the director of IT is charged with this same function. I believe it is a duplication. It's his job to be an expert on this, and I don't think another position is called for at this time, considering the deficit that we are facing.
Anybody else? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bale?
No.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
No.
Mr. Scatella?
No.
Mr. Winarski?
No.
And Chairman Shank.
No. Number 45, please.
Action sheet number 45, amending the ordinance by eliminating the new IT specialist 2 position requested in the budget.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Any questions, Terry?
I'm afraid to say no, yes.
Maybe you just define that for them,
So
please.
to clarify, this was a new position request in the budget. If you vote yes, you are eliminating it. If you vote no, you are keeping it in the budget.
Thank you. Any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Sorry. 40, 48, 53. Thanks for reminding me.
That's all right.
Okay, we're at
Number
action
46.
sheet number 46 to amend the budget by restoring the temporary staff line in the magisterial district judge's line. This is a difference of $10.
I've got a first by Rennie, Showerman, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Last one.
Okay, last one, number 48.
Last one until we group. This is action sheet number 47 to amend the ordinance by adjusting fees and revenues to projected 2022 amounts.
Second.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would like to amend the ordinance by grouping action sheets 48 through 53, which has a number of proposed increases for positions that has been presented before council previously.
Okay, got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I've wrestled a lot with this one in view, again, of the deficit situation, but I will be voting in favor of these increases. I will be voting yes for a number of reasons, all of which has been explained to us. These are revenue-producing positions. So I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Again, this is on the amendment.
On the amendment, correct.
Yes, Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton. Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. 54.
We're grouping, okay, this is amending.
We need one more. We amended to be grouped together as one.
We didn't
No,
need to
that was
do
all
it
one
as an
vote.
amendment.
We're good to go? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, this is amending the ordinance, grouping numbers, action sheets 54, 55, and 56 as one vote. These are all, two are decreasing over time, one is increasing fees and revenues.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote on amending.
On amending. Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton. Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman. Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. 57.
All right. Action sheet number 57, amending the ordinance by increasing funding to the Maria House Reentry Program by $20,000.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Roll call vote for the amendment.
Okay. Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton. Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. 58.
Action sheet number 58, to restore grant revenue line and remove donations revenue that are no longer expected to be received and the related expenses in Veterans Affairs.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please, on the amendment.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number 59.
Action sheet number 59, amending the ordinance to increase pay for position in Veterans Affairs Coordinator from NB10F to NB10I.
Second.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie.
No.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Number 60.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
for action sheets numbers 60 through 68, all of those transfers from the gaming fund were already approved in the gaming fund. I would submit that you could group 60 through 68 and that 69 should be pulled since that failed in the gaming fund.
That was 69 failed.
Correct. Is that what? So number 69 was the 300,000 to the redevelopment authority for the youth workforce development. Since that failed in the gaming fund, I would recommend pulling it from the general fund.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Move to amend the ordinance by including action sheets numbers 60 through 68.
Okay, I got a first. Ms. Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shane.
Yes. 69 has failed, so we go to 70.
I need, oh, never mind. Wrong line.
Mr. Chairman, action sheet number 70 to amend the ordinance to adjust transfer to public safety fund to actual.
I got a first by Ms. Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shane.
Yes. Number 71.
Number 71 should be pulled because it failed in the gaming fund.
Okay, go to 72.
72 is to, can we group 72 and 73, Amy?
No, we're gonna take a pause after 72. 73, I need to calculate the transfers from the other funds to make sure I have all the correct numbers.
Thank you. Okay,
So 72.
thank you. Action sheet number 72 to amend the ordinance to adjust supporting detail to match the budget for County Council Department, Information Technology Department, Coroner Department, and Public Defender Department.
I've got a first from Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman. Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
And Chairman Shane.
Yes. Okay, on my notes here it says stop.
She's going to calculate for us.
So Amy, I'm not rushing you, but what kind of time you need? Say 10, that way we can take a break. All right, we're gonna go take a break. We'll be back in 10. Take 10. Well, Amy, it's all on you. You have the magic.
Okay, so for action sheet number 73, Mary, would you like to make the motion to include it, and then I'll read off the numbers?
Yes, thank you. I move to include action sheet number 73, amending the ordinance to adjust transfers to other funds as needed.
I've got a first and second. Amy, you're up.
Okay, so we're going to decrease the transfer to the Domestic Relations Fund by $29,845.
What was that number? I'm sorry, what was that?
So these numbers are based on all of the actions that happened in all of the other funds. This is the net effect of the county portion of those funds. So we're going to decrease the transfer to Domestic Relations Fund by $29,845. Decrease the transfer to Children and Youth Fund by $8,429. Increase the transfer to the Planning Fund by $1,721. Decrease the transfer to the Library Fund by $12,000. Decrease the transfer to the Public Health Fund by $205,182. And decrease the transfer to the Public Safety Fund by $22,432.
So just to recap, for domestic relations, it decreases $29,845. Children and youth is $80,429. Planning is increased $1,720.
1721.
1721. And the library fund decreased by $12,000. Public health fund decreased by $205,182. I'm sorry. I need a walk. And I'll repeat that, the public health fund decreased by $205,182, and the public safety fund was decreased by $22,432.
That is correct. You have a motion and a second, so now you just need a vote on that ordinance, that action sheet amendment.
The first from Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please, on that amendment.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mrs. Menni.
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
So the next action sheet is for revenue. This is a placeholder if there's any council person who wishes to recommend a change, tax increase essentially. If none, then I can provide the updated expenditure.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
while I'm not prepared to propose a tax increase, I feel like I should say something and speak to in light of the deficit. No one likes to hear the word tax increase. Certainly not our homeowners, our residents, or property owners. Me or my colleagues as well. I believe that a tax hike would be appropriate. I will not propose such a hike because we just simply do not have the will to do it. But I wanted to go on record because next year, when this budget comes back, that can only get kicked so far. So we have 7 to 10 million projected this year. We look at maybe 15 million next year. And so I wanted that to be highlighted from the dais that although we will not consider a tax increase, the citizens should prepare themselves for next year. Either we're going to increase revenue or we're going to decrease expenditure. But to provide all the services that we're asked to provide as a county, all the responsibilities to our employees, it's unsustainable. Basic math. Revenues do not line up to your expenditures. There's an issue. I also think that going into our fund balance puts us on a slippery slope when it comes to our bond ratings. People say, wow, you guys have done a great, fantastic job. My predecessors, and I'm blessed to even be included in that, and that we've been good stewards over the revenue and over the fund balance. And we have such a healthy fund balance. They've been great stewards over it. I'm a little disheartened because I see things on the horizon that don't just the proverbial add up, since we're talking about finance. Things don't add up. We put forth a long, exhausting day into this budget, a month or two into deliberation. So I want to thank my colleagues for their patience with me. And I want to thank you for your astute diligence and the time and effort that you placed into this budget. No one knows, like I know. Citizens don't know the sacrifice that you all pay, all that you sacrifice. When we talk about finances, we talk about all these non-bargaining wages, and we're going to be talking about bargaining units, and that's why, because we're in those discussions right now, and that hasn't been accounted for in this budget. That's why I say get ready. When we talk about this stuff, I want you to know that all the criticism and critiques, because you're going to get them, we're going to get them. We get paid on average $10,878 and some odd cents. We're doing a $570 million budget. And while I don't always agree with my colleagues, there's not a finer group, men and women, that I would work with, choose to work with, because I know that they love this county. We don't agree on a lot of things, but there's a lot that we do agree on as well. So on behalf of myself, in the district that I represent, 2nd Legislative District and the 40,000 residents therein. I want to thank my colleagues for putting forth such long hours from being away from your families to make sure that this budget gets adopted in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just as a result of the increase in revenues and the decrease of expenditures, the change, so the fund balance appropriated in the general fund decreased by $3,149,051. The updated expenditure amount for the general fund is $123,850,362. So you'll need an amendment to the face sheet for that amount. $123,850,362 is the updated expenditure amount in the general fund.
I move that the face sheet be put forward to reflect that sum.
I have a first by Mr. Horton. I need a second. I have a second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
Excuse me, this is on the face sheet.
This is on the face sheet.
This is to amend the face sheet for the general fund for the updated expenditures.
Okay, well then that's yes.
All right, yes.
Amending the face sheet. So I'm sorry, Mr. Horton, were you changing that?
To yes.
So your vote is a
We're voting
yes.
on the actual thing, but we're voting on the amendment. My vote would be yes, we should have been.
Amending the face sheet, yes for Mr. Horton. I'm sorry, Mrs. Rennie?
Yes.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
So the next vote will be on the general fund budget as amended, and then the ordinance after that is the vote on the real estate tax levy, just for clarification.
What votes do we have left besides the general fund, real estate tax levy, that's it?
That's it. Well, you moved the two project resolved things to the end of the agenda, so you still have those two items left. But as far as the budget is concerned, those are the last two.
Okay.
So you still need a motion to accept ordinance number 165 as amended.
Motion to accept 165 as amended? Second.
I've got a first by Rennie, second by Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Rennie?
No.
Mrs. Showerman?
We're just accepting the corrected figures, right? Yes. This is a vote on the budget.
Yes.
This is the vote on the general fund budget as amended.
Yeah.
Mr. Scatella?
No.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
No.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes.
Was that a pass 4-3, Ms. Lomsky?
Yes, it did.
Now we're on item V, Mr. Chair.
What's that, Amy?
We're on item V now, and there's no changes to that ordinance.
Yes. Reading on V, please.
Second reading of ordinance number 166 of 2022-2023 real estate tax levy.
What's that?
You need a motion and a second on that.
So moved.
First.
Then I'd ask for
So this ordinance is to approve the real estate tax levy as it currently is. As it currently is.
We're not changing nothing. It's the way it is right now. Okay. I have a first and second. First by Mr. Horton, second by Ms. Showerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
Mr. Scatella.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yeah.
Mrs. Rennie.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Yes. Right, now we go back to where we started. This falls under old business. A, second reading of ordinance 145, in title only, please.
Second reading of ordinance number 145 of 2022 American Rescue Plan Fund, budget revised expenditures of $2.5 million and the creation of a new line item for Project Resolve.
So moved.
Okay, I think I got a Jim first, and we'll go with Ellen on the second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
it goes without saying, we've discussed this all year long. I won't be supporting this for lots of reasons. And it's nice to think that certain funds won't be decimated as a result of Project Resolve. But I think the argument is there that it is not appropriate and not an appropriate use of the funding. And I think it presents problems for the county down the road as well. And I'm going to go on record for saying that I do not agree with this, and I do not find it an appropriate use of ARPA funding.
Duly noted. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I too cannot support this, as great an idea as it is. I do believe that it's misuse of ARPA funds. I believe that there's potential for the county to be on the hook for those funds should this be adopted. And finally, our solicitor, Mr. Talarico, sent us a very long, detailed letter stating point by point why we should not be supporting this ordinance, or this resolution, this ordinance. And so I will not be supporting.
Anybody else?
I am going to say that a lot of what we have done with the ARPA money is helping people. And I believe in the long run, this will also help people. We have to use a little bit of it to look to the future, to help our children and our children's children. With this, it's a great opportunity for Erie that I don't think we should pass up. And although our solicitor did express his opinions, the people that we have hired as experts for spending ARPA money say that this is absolutely within the realm, in legal realm of using ARPA money. I have talked with other counties around the state, and they are using theirs for projects exactly like this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Scatella.
No.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Bale.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
No.
Mrs. Rennie.
No.
Mrs. Showerman.
Yes.
And Chairman Shank.
Look at that, right down the middle when I go with yes. Okay. B, second reading of ordinance number 146 in title only, please.
Second reading of ordinance number 146 of 2022, first 2022 gaming fund budget supplemental appropriation of $2.5 million from unrestricted gaming funds and creation of new line item for Project Resolve.
Got a first?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Winarski. Any discussion? Of course. There you go, sir.
Great. Okay, we touched on this a little earlier about the community college, with the gaming revenue funds, how they've been committed. That's That's one that we can't back out of. So to take $2.5 million unrestricted gaming funds when we know that we have a prior obligation, I think is just irresponsible. Finally, I'm just still hung up on the state giving $1 million RACP. Citizen of Erie chosen to double that and some. I don't think it's a good use of our money. I think that we'll have repercussions by it. So we'll call for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Keep seats down below. No comments? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Bale?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
No.
Mrs. Rennie?
No.
Mrs. Showerman?
Yes.
Mr. Scatella?
No?
And Chairman Shank?
And back to me again. Yes. Okay. County crew, are we good? Office people, are we good? Get to go to the last page.
What's your favorite page?
The next Finance Personnel Committee meeting are Thursday, December 1st, 2022 at 4 p.m. in room 114 Alpha, Erie County Courthouse, or via Zoom. I want to take a quick moment out of y'all want to get out the door, but I want to thank each and every one of you for sitting here being patient. I want to give a special thank you to our staff, Jill down in the office, and our legal team, and our accountants for making this all good. Paul, great. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out today. Oh, gobble, gobble. I'll have a motion to, whatever the word is, I'm tired. Adjourn. Go home.